And the consent agenda has 1, 2, 3, 5 items today.
Well, being that it's a consent agenda, I'd like just to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I was just going to ask you if anybody wanted to remove anything from the consent agenda.
Don't we do that
before we made that?
We usually do that at the beginning of the meeting when the agenda is approved.
Well, that's correct. That has been our practice. Okay. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I just made one.
Second. Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Then seeing none, I think I'll. Ms. Held, would you ask people for their votes, please?
Member Friend?
Aye.
President Throop?
Aye.
Member Wilson?
Aye.
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wright?
Aye. And now the fun begins. In the action item, the first item is review and approve the first interim report. And fortunately, that's Superintendent Smith's responsibility.
I question your sincerity there. So, as always, Rebecca does a great job with the narrative in the front. Everything in the back is synopsized in the front, but I would point out to you, I don't know, about 8 pages in or so is the property tax revenue trends, and with the latest estimate, which is staying the same at 4.89%. However, you can see that last year we came in at 6.65. So, who knows what'll happen this year, but that's still a pretty conservative estimate on our revenues. There's, from initial budget adoption on page 3, I would point you at the expenditure adjustments that were realized once you got into the budget. We moved the counselor from being contracted to, last year we paid her on an independent contract, so it showed up under a different part of the budget. Now that she's an employee, even though the cost is the same, it changed the certificated salaries budget because it shows up there instead of under services, contracted services. So,
can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
Where's the offset?
Well, the adjustments to services and operations, why aren't we seeing the full 15,000 savings there? That's a good question. We are seeing a reduction in that estimated budget of 2,200, but that's not as much as that counselor's salary is. I believe that's almost 15,000, if my memory serves me correctly. So why we don't, there must have been other increases in services and operations that limited the impact on that part of the budget. I could follow up and look into that. I didn't get into that detail.
If it's a significant number, but if it's just a bunch of small things added together, you don't need to do it for me.
You mean, was there a big additional item? Sure, I can look into that.
And the transfer to cafeteria fund going down by $47,000, that's good. The cafeteria, well, the cafeteria is bringing in more revenue or spending less money, or doing something?
Well, the law changed, and now we are able to, through direct certification, qualify students for free and reduced meals, which means our reimbursements for meals goes up. And so we are actually all the way up to 45% of our students qualifying for free and reduced meals, believe it or not.
Wow, that's high.
Up from 32% last year. But that's mainly because of the law change, and now we can direct certify those students. In other words, parents that didn't want to fill out the form and tell us that they had low income, now we get the direct certification from the state because they've applied to the state for other types of benefits. And so the parents don't have to fill out the form. We get that information and can qualify them without them filling out the form, because with the local school, some parents think that maybe, you know, the local school doesn't keep their information confidential, even though we do. And so some parents sometimes are hesitant to fill out those forms. That's the only way I can really postulate on why we were able to go from 32% to 45% this year, was parents' reluctance to fill out the forms. Because I know Abby was making every effort to follow up and get every parent to fill out the form. So yeah, that's a big change, and that really helps.
Sorry.
Now, I broke his train of thought.
I'm just looking down through those, all the notes are there, right? The new language arts curriculum cost more than we estimated, which isn't unusual. But I wanted to make sure that our teachers had all the components of the curriculum that they felt like they needed. And so there's the base curriculum, and then there's all the add-ons, and we ended up purchasing a few more add-ons than I anticipated. But if the teachers are using them and, you know, they're helping kids, I didn't want to skimp there. The capital outlay, we weren't sure on the timing of that Smart Walk project, so those Prop 39 carryover funds, those are being expended, and we know they are because the project's getting done. But back in June, when we adopted the budget, there were still a lot of question marks on when and where that would happen, so that was an adjustment.
And we got that money a year or two ago. We've had that money for some time.
Exactly.
And which fund has that money been nestled in? It hasn't been nestled in the unrestricted reserve fund.
I think that's why she marked it capital outlay, because it's coming out of that capital outlay fund. Or no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's been a set aside in the general fund. It's just earmarked in a set aside, so it's kind of, those set asides kind of just sit off to the side in the general fund. And because that's why, and it kind of muddies the water when you have monies like that sitting in the general fund. That's why I'm working with Rebecca to bring forward a resolution, possibly next month, maybe February. There's no hurry, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm gonna bring forward a resolution asking the board to establish a Fund 20. And Fund 20 is where we will put those required other post-employment benefits, the retiree benefits amounts that come out of the actuarial studies. I'll put that money in Fund 20. And then what will have to happen at the end of the year, once we realize those expenses, we will have to transfer the amount out back into the general fund to pay for those retiree benefits once a year. And that'll, I believe, to transfer that back out, we'll have to do that through board resolution also. So But that way, that sits off to the side, in its own fund, and it doesn't muddy the water like, these earmarked monies do.
So Scott, if I'm understanding you right, then it doesn't show up as a general fund on the ledger.
Exactly.
And so if you're doing a per student breakdown, it doesn't show up there because it's actually not being spent for
And
the students anyway.
It was neither income nor expense before, and that's
Yeah.
this strange school accounting that mixes the income statement and the balance sheet together.
Yeah, Sax accounting is weird. The state accounting system is kind of weird sometimes. It's like,
Not the only thing.
well,
No
and
attention
one
to
example of
the-
that right here is you've got, this is right out of Sax, right, the state accounting system, and you have certificated salaries separate from classified salaries, yet both certificated and classified benefits go into one account line. To me, if you're breaking them out, wouldn't you break out the benefits also? But that's not how the system works, and that's how it is statewide, so.
And I have a question while you're on those lines.
Sure.
Because we don't have a separate agreement with the classified employees, it's my understanding that their changes in step and column are always Me Too changes, and they're the same as the certificated. And I don't understand why certificated is 2% and classified is 3%.
Oh, on this adopted salary schedule.
Right here, other adjustments. Bottom two lines on that page.
What page you on?
Oh,
3 in the very
Still on
beginning.
page 2.
it's
It looks
funny.
like this.
I like how she has
Susan, it looks like this.
0.03% when really.
He's looking at the very
it's just
bottom,
3%.
very,
But, that is a product
You see it,
not
Susan?
of, that's a product of how the district adopted the classified salary schedule with all those steps that are on it,
Yeah,
which was done long before I got here. And it was just built that way.
right, but,
How
But my-
and when that was established, I have no idea.
but my point is there is no classified salary schedule. They moved Me Too.
No, there is a classified salary schedule.
Well, it's been made administratively from the certificated step and column, because we don't have
I
a
don't think
separate
so.
agreement with the classified employees.
Okay, so when there's a percent raise,
Yeah,
the percent raise would be the Me Too part.
right,
That's been past practice, and so you would apply that to the certificated salary and the same percent to the classified salary. But on their initial inception, how the classified salary was adopted by this board, I don't know those details. But at one point or another, the administration made a recommendation to the board to adopt a salary schedule. And based off of that classified salary schedule, every time the certificated union gets a percent raise, that same percent is applied to the classified schedule.
right, I agree with that.
Okay, so I'm.
So why are the numbers
See why-
different?
Why are the numbers different? This is 2%.
Because on the classified salary schedule, it's 3% between steps. And isn't that what that's saying? And on the
don't think
certificated
so,
one,
no.
it's only 2%.
No, this is the year-over-year change in the step and column. The way our certificated step and column changes are set up right now, it's a uniform 2%.
Right, that's what it says. Certificated step is 2%.
Right.
So each year, each employee is gonna get a 2% raise.
Correct.
The classified step is 3%.
Why, if it mimics the certificated?
It doesn't. It only mimics it in a percent raise when we apply an overall raise to it. It doesn't mimic the certificated
I
salary
think I
schedule
understand
at
what
all.
Terry's confused.
Oh,
So
we're
this,
using we're using the same word 2 different ways.
right, well, no, I think what this table is showing is what the what the percentage is between each step.
Right.
So,
No, that doesn't vary from year to year. This is showing how, well,
right, but if in this given year, then there was a raise, then that would go up. But right now, if you look at each schedule, teacher's step is different by 2%, classified is 3%. This is just saying what the difference is, it's not saying a raise yet. So that's just how when
Oh, right.
when the certificated step and column was created, it was created with 3% between the two. So if there was a 2% raise, then certificated would then be 4%, and class would be 5 for that particular
You
year.
mean what the employee would see?
Yeah,
Right.
that was one of the.
we don't need to draw that up.
But that was,
Yeah, but they
an
start so much
issue,
lower
and,
though.
and for new board members,
Jim,
you'd be
they start
talking
lower.
about
Starts
the
really
amount,
low.
and people wouldn't be looking at step and
Started
column,
columns
so,
first.
you're getting a
Yeah,
2%
but classified
raise.
is just, it's
Well, that doesn't seem like very much, but there's already this built-in step and column that's happening, so, it's significantly more. And that's how.
Right, because each individual certificated employee is gonna get the 2% step and column plus
Right.
the 1% overall raise next year, totaling 3% in
Right.
their actual pay.
Right.
Okay, I don't want to take more time here. I would ask you to go back to the property tax revenue trends on this very cleverly unnumbered page. Because every now and we talk about this and we say, oh, these projections are always conservative,
It's this one. It's an
are always
unnumbered
conservative,
page.
and it
Doesn't
turns
matter.
out to be a bigger increase. I've never looked at what that means. So this year, last year, 16-17, we had $155,000 increase in property tax income, right?
wait, so where are you looking, where's that number?
Right here.
2016-17,
Second
have-
column from the right.
Oh, thank you,
right, the one that says increase prior year,
okay.
155,000. And that was due to a 6.65% increase in the assessed value. Now, for this year, the estimated increase in the assessed value is 4.89%, and the estimated dollar increase is 121,000. Now, if it turns out that the actual increase is the same as it was last year, we're only going to get $30,000 more. I have sat here for 4 years, and every time I've heard that mantra, oh, but they always underestimate the taxes, I've had visions of $100,000 change or $150,000 change in our income between the low estimate
Right.
and a more realistic estimate. This is only $30,000. It's peanuts. We can't rely on that.
Yeah, I noted those percentages over
Interesting
here.
observation.
Right, although I believe, I can't remember now, off the top of my head, maybe it wasn't, I'm not sure if that was a 4.89 at budget adoption, or if that's changed.
But I'm just saying, it doesn't make any difference because the difference between those two numbers is on the order of $35,000. I mean, that's the same order of magnitude as these little adjustments that we're making here. That's not the money that's gonna keep us from chewing into our reserves.
Well, I had that discussion, with Rebecca the other day, and, part of what has been happening is we've been doing those end-of-year transfers.
Yeah,
And those end-of-year transfers don't necessarily have to happen. And she proposed,
What do you mean the end of the year transfer?
we moved end-of-year transfers, last year, one into transportation, one into, one into capital outlay. We did a set aside for legal
and it's set
services.
aside for, special ed.
Mm-hmm. So she asked, do you wanna continue to build a transportation fund and a capital outlay fund at the end of the year, or would you rather be able to come in at 15% on our reserves? And I thought it was clear from my discussions with the board that the board would like to maintain a 15% reserve.
I think that that's true, but this is sort of the first time I feel like we've had a real global discussion about that rather than accepting the numbers that were there, because clearly it's a good thing to build the transportation reserve so that we have the money when we need the new school bus, and it's good to build the capital outlay, and we need to have reserves for legal fees, and we need to have reserves for special ed. But I don't think I don't recall us ever looking at those pots of discretionary money, if you will, and saying, because we should have that discussion long before the resolution ends up before us, so that together with you, we can make some decisions and work that out. You don't have to turn your mic on.
Oh.
We are alone, you know,
okay.
so they deserted
All right.
us.
You can, as if you couldn't hear me.
I'll turn my hearing aid.
Terry, what you're talking about that 30,000, I was just looking at the last 4 years and averaging it out, which was 6.5%. And then when you get down to a 4%, it's actually it's a 2% increase, and I was multiplying it times the net tax anyway of the previous year. So it actually looks like it's closer to 65%, 65,000 is if things continue on the same trends. But the other part that I seem to remember is when we get to the end of the year, because of the way Rebecca does things, there are other monies that have been estimated.
Right, all the budgets are an estimate.
But they're
if it's not
estimated,
spent, it falls back down into.
right, that there are estimates on these on almost everything that are higher in case they go higher, but to have them all go higher is unlikely. So oftentimes there's been a recapture of $60,000 outside of the property tax increase. So it does add up to maybe closer to your 100,000 when you're
Yep.
taking the actual ending balance.
That could be. Will you do this for me, for us? Will you just, for the next board meeting, or even before the next board meeting, give us the unrestricted reserve balance for the previous 5 years? Because that's the only number that counts, right? That's the net of all of these changes. And I don't see in here any history. In the budget, I'm sure there is history. I don't think we'll have to do a vast amount of research to find that number.
Yeah.
But what will that tell you? Besides, I mean, if we could put money different places to build up our funds, and our reserves would be different. So without having a quick number look up, yeah, that would be easy, but knowing the history behind that, like let's say we have if we put extra money in these other funds, our reserves may be 9%. But if we don't put it in those reserves, our reserves could be 15.
Right.
So knowing just those numbers for the past 5 years, how is that helpful without knowing the rest of the budget numbers where?
Except that only the things that can really be restricted are restricted, and
Still, right.
yeah, and so I mean the quick way for me when I want to check those is that number is actually in data.
It's a data, right.
In a separate, you have to look at the different parts of it,
Right.
and you can go right to that number, and then you could do the trend there, if that's what you were looking at.
Or the other number, to address Carrie's question, the other number that I think is useful, God, I don't remember what they call them in school accounting, the net income from Fund 1. Okay, that's our big operating fund. right?
General fund is one, yeah.
So, do we have more income than we have expense? Because the way that you would build up your reserve, if you have to do it, our income, there's not a lot of discretion in our income. We do everything we can to maximize our income. So our only discretion is in our expenses. Do we have fewer teachers' aides is an obvious thing. We have more teachers' aides per student than anybody else in the county. So those are the things that we can adjust if we say, these are the levels of reserves that we want.
The other thing that I find useful, because I do look at this quite a bit, is because, you know, you have all these moving targets like enrollment and everything. If you go to the per student spending of income versus expenses, that's the easiest way to see the difference of, are you upside down, or are you building reserves by not spending as much? And then you can go back and calculate a dollar, you can see the dollar amount, but the easiest way to see what individual years look like, and are we doing a good job? And that's why looking at Coast, it's, you know, they have a scary situation because they're upside down every year. So,
but I don't find it very helpful to look at the student population, which fluctuates from year to year to year. And we don't, generally, with the exception of the eighth grade class that you mentioned, where we will have fewer eighth graders next year, and we might adjust staff. I've been here for 4 years. I don't recall any talk about adjusting staff based on how many kids are enrolled this year. Our fluctuation in the number of kids enrolled is just not that great.
yeah, I'm just saying that your overall expenses are all these different things, and it's a way to judge, are we managing our overall funds well by keeping in the black rather than in the red? Because there are others, if you try to say, okay, we have this much income, federal funds, state funds, and all that are changing because of student needs and changes in, you know, how much the feds are giving us and all that stuff. And just coming down to know, are you managing, it's like you get to the end of every month and you say, did I have as much income as I had? To me, that's a quick way to see how we're doing.
I would just comment that I think you're absolutely right. I think the big idea point that you're making is that we may need to look at making some cutbacks for next year. And I literally have a brainstormed list of possible cutbacks on my desk right now. There's some other things that I want to find out in the next couple months before I can really make any informed recommendation at this point. Trying to look at everything globally, I've brainstormed the list with Liz, I've brainstormed it with Hannah, I've brainstormed it with Rebecca. You know, I'm gonna keep working that because I want to be prepared in case we need to make some cuts so that we stay fiscally sound.
That's great, and I'm pleased that we're looking.
The one other thing is that I always see is that we're such a small school, and just the way our numbers are, this, you know, having one teacher per grade, except when you have a large class, is natural. A really big district, district is even as large as Coast, you can start going, oh, we need, you know, 3 classes of middle school English, 8th grade middle school English, and we need 3 teachers to handle that, whatever it ends up being. And then when things go down, you can say, we can let somebody go, or we can do those things, and we don't have that. And, you know, what used to happen when we were revenue limit is we'd have combined classes, you know, you know, I don't know what the numbers are right now, but there would be a 2-3, or there might be a 2-3 and a 3-4 to get and so you have 2 teachers teaching 3 grades was the way, you know, that was managed, and it was necessary in those days, and it's less necessary now, and so I think we've fallen into what may be a rut from what you're saying.
So Susan, Susan?
I'm listening. No, I was actually just, but it's all curious to me because we're gonna be getting more money. It looks like it's all going up. Might not be going up as quickly as we want.
Those are just projections too, so she makes it.
Go ahead.
But my question is, do you understand that the basic difference between revenue limit and basic
Yes.
aid? Okay, because if we were revenue limit, the state gives us so much money per student, and then when your number of students changes, your income
Yes, I
changes,
understand that.
and we're independent of that. Good for you. Okay,
So, if I could just make one more comment on that, when you go to the this
yellow,
color right here.
the yellow pages?
Yes, and it's the first page.
Is that yellow
And-
or
Cream or whatever,
Yeah.
buff, I think is what it's called.
Whatever you want.
And we look at our expenditures, right? And then you go over to projected year totals, so it's the third column from the right. That shows you what, and then the column to the right is the difference, right? And that's what we just looked at in those, in the summary. Well, you can see that we're projected to spend 1.4 million on certificated salaries, 451,000 on classified salaries. And then when you go to the next column, when you look at the difference, when it's, because of the way this spreadsheet works, and that's why these things are so hard to read, sometimes a negative is in parentheses, sometimes, but when it's in the expenditure side, that 54,000 in parentheses is an increase. Even though it shows up as a negative, that's an increase in cost.
Right.
From the previous year, right?
From our adopted budget.
Right, okay.
And so that's an increase in the budget. But that 451,000, while we could do a little bit with some certificated staff, and I know that we are very well staffed around here for the number of students we have.
I wasn't advocating a change, I was just,
The main places that there is some wiggle room, frankly, would be in paraeducators. That's just the way school budgets work, unfortunately. When you start looking at any significant cuts, that ends up being kind of the point of the spear. And so I'm hopeful that we find other ways to come in under budget in certain budgets this year. Look at other ways to save money. I'm gonna keep my eye on what our electric bill turns into now that we have the solar panels in place, because we spend $3,500 a month while school is in session on electricity. You know, that can, you know, if we could reduce that significantly, that could help. If we could put a few $20,000 and $30,000 together, it turns into a significant amount of savings. So I'm going to look at those types of savings first, but if push comes to shove, we'll probably have to end up taking a look at our paraeducators and how we have paraeducators in every classroom right now.
so let me ask one more question about this chart, because this is the sort of stuff that really puzzles me.
Oh, you're going to ask a question.
No, you can understand.
Go ahead.
Are we still on the page 1? Terry?
Yeah. I may never get beyond page 1.
Well, this is
If
the
you look at-
unrestricted and restricted combined.
If you look at expenditures and you go down to number 6, capital outlay, you see we have a zero budget and we have $211,200 in expenses. And we know that those are our solar power and our bright lights.
Right.
And that, quote unquote, they're being paid for by Prop 39 money, so we don't have to worry about that. But if I look then at the net operating income, which is row C, it shows that we're spending $372,000 more than our income.
Where's the
And-
372?
Yeah,
It's row C.
Letter C, next,
Excess
3
of
columns from the
efficiency.
end.
I know, but
In D.
Yeah,
in
we point to it on
in
yours.
D,
Oh, so
C.
D, not C, okay.
Well, it's,
No,
it's,
C.
it's column D.
Oh, it's row C, column
Right.
D.
You sunk my battleship.
Come on, you're supposed to use numbers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But then,
Okay.
but Terry, you're saying that then you have to subtract the $200,000 from that. 'cause
Well,
that's-
I don't know. I mean, when we got the $200,000 from the state, did it show up as a surplus here? So that we figured we had a lot more money to put into reserves and do other things with?
Yes.
And we did that. We took, if you wonder why our income isn't as much, it's because we took advantage of that.
And
We weren't
that,
clever enough
right,
to.
it artificially led you to believe you had more income than you really had at the time, because that shows up and pads your reserve, and that's why when you do these construction projects, it's planned deficit spending.
The one last comment I'd like to make is that the beauty of getting to the 15% reserve is the opportunity to take advantage of the moment and do things that improve. You know, I mean, we don't want to be down at the minimum and then try to do something. So unless we're on again, the coast model of falling, 6 years, 7 years in a row, then if we go down 1 or 2 years, but we have a plan to bring it back, then I think that's, again, doing our job. I'm trying to avoid buying a new car because it'll put a significant dent in our reserves.
And this one page from school services
How far
is a very nice little snapshot look at the bottom that talks about state reserve requirements.
You gonna make us hunt and peck, you're gonna tell us about where it
That's
is?
in the beginning page.
Like the 4th or 5th page in, or
Got it.
right after the tax
Right
revenue.
here.
What's page number?
Doesn't have one,
8, 9,
but it says school services
Yeah.
Oh,
on
it's,
the
yeah,
bottom.
it's the page immediately following the.
yeah. And see at the bottom where it says what the required state reserves are for the
Yep.
different sizes of districts. It's just a nice little snapshot for your information on. And so, ours is 5% or $66,000 is our minimum required state reserve. I just thought you might like seeing that. And that
Also, on the bottom of page 4 of the narrative, she has a nice explanation about all that.
Yeah, but we didn't put anything that's supposed to.
No, I'm just saying
You wouldn't
that
have any fingernails left.
it shows how it's a sliding scale for depending on the size of the district.
Right. So I'm interested, and I don't want to continue this discussion a whole lot more. I'm looking at the percentage increases in PERS and STIRS, and we know they're going to be big. And I was interested yesterday that the Blue Ribbon panel noted as a big increase what I thought they were saying was medical expenses, cost of their medical program. And they didn't mention PERS and STIRS about other big increases in San Luis coastal expenses between now and 2025, unless they were lumping
Unless
those
they were
all
somehow
together.
lumping. They could have been, because that was a very precursory report. I mean, I'd have to go read it
Yeah,
again.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that in CalPERS especially, we're at 15.5%.
right.
And it goes all the way up to 23.8 in 2021.
And that's
Let's see, 8% increase
okay.
Terry, when I
in the
read
next few years.
the article, which I thought was pretty good,
I
especially
think the
with
article
your
was
guys'
pretty good.
report, is
I didn't see
That's
it.
one thing they don't have control over. So I think they were talking about areas you can control. You can't, you know, there's a contract for STRS and PERS that's already part of the budget. I think that I got what they were looking at as actual
Cuts
things
they
that
could make.
They could get in and leverage.
But it was mentioned last night, it wasn't in the newspaper report, just like the money from, interdistrict transfers wasn't in the newspaper
Oh,
report.
it was.
It was?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I read it. That
oh,
was-
I must have
It
overlooked
it didn't have any numbers attached to it. It had the 400,000 and the 160 students, and I looked at, well, that's $2,500 per student, which doesn't seem like a reasonable,
It depends on the grade level too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway, I'm
but-
sorry.
But they're gonna be very conservative on their income side, they have to be,
So what's
because
that meant?
they can't force that to happen.
Yeah.
That has to be a negotiation.
I thought the other interesting one, though, is even after all these issues were dealt with, you know, their negatives, they were still looking at a 3%, 3-point-something% increase. After, you know, as it went downhill, you had all these expenses, your income was still gonna rise 3+%, which is more than some, I think more than Paso and stuff like that. So anyway, they weren't totally upside down. I think it's also, you know, window dressing to some extent. I mean, it's real, but
Okay.
they are going up.
Are we ready to vote to approve the first interim report?
I'll make a motion that we approve the first interim report.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? I think there couldn't be. Ms. Hill, if you would.
Member Wilson?
Aye.
Member Brownell?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
May I just comment that was a good conversation, thank you.
It was.
No, you may not.
I had a tail end thought for
No,
You're
it's over.
welcome to-
Yeah.
Your tail end's done.
To dig in a little deeper and everything, would it be productive to have Rebecca, you know, we're
Okay, so the next
Budgets can
thing,
be hard, so I'm sorry.
next thing on our agenda is the developer fee annual report and 5-year plan.
Snooze.
I think, if I'm correct, you have managed to consolidate all of that into one page.
That's because we haven't done anything. It only takes one page to write we didn't do anything. We still haven't done anything.
But we're gonna, and this year, so the new agreement took effect on July 1st, 2017.
Talking about the new split?
Yeah. So we will accumulate money even faster here in the future. Not fast enough, but one step at a time.
Coming back to something related to this that Carrie was talking about earlier, about potential for actually losing money, which we shouldn't do. Maybe we should look at the 5-year plan, or at least a facilities plan. I don't think it necessarily has to be a full-on, you know, reworked 5-year plan, but identifying some areas that, you know, if we aren't gonna spend money on property, if that would be a good use for this, and, because it's a significant amount of money, and it could, you know, address some things we need to do. It's just, but on the facilities level.
Good point. Would someone like to move that we approve the developer fee annual report and 5-year plan?
I have a question.
Well, I'll keep it. I'll make the motion
Is there a second?
when I go home.
I'll second it.
Is there further discussion?
Well, I have just a question though, or I'm not sure if it's a question or discussion. But with that, I agree with Ron, we need to do something, because if we're not gonna have a plan, it seems like we need to give back that 25,000, if that's 5 years. I mean, so we at least need to come up, I don't know when the deadline for that is, but if it's June of 17, I think before then, we need to come up with a plan, because I don't feel, because if the money's not spent, it's supposed to go back, and I don't feel right saying, ho, 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 no one's gonna ask.
Wait, the school is under no obligation to give the money back. If it's not spent, the developer can request the money back.
And it has to be the developer that put that money in.
Put the money in.
That number of years ago.
Right.
And again, I think if.
I would just hope that we would do something first, so that doesn't put us in a pickle eventually.
No, I agree with you that.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with it just sitting there.
Yeah, and it would be just saying, for example, we have a very old portable down there for art. And just start the process of saying, what would it cost to replace that? Should it be in the same place? Then you've got a project going
And then it would be in the plan, then I would feel more comfortable with that, because right now, our 5-year plan says, oh, nothing.
Yeah. But again, from my knowledge about that, the 5-year plans tend to be bigger. You would, if you wanted to replace, and Scott may have he's done this before. If you said, like I'm just using that for an example, if you identified that and started, some planning for it or just the feasibility for it, you'd be on the road to that without having to create a whole 5-year plan, because it's an older building that that could be replaced out of this money. So anyway.
Actually, I
I have
don't,
a
regular.
question. What does the money have to go towards? Is there like a limited range
Yeah.
of what you can use it for?
It's
What's the
most-
parameters?
My understanding, the parameters have to be you get developer fees, because development is supposed to conceivably increase our enrollment. So anything you spend the money on would be to mitigate the impacts of those new students here at school. So you
just to
can't,
accommodate more kids?
right, so you cannot use it for asbestos, you cannot use it for things that you would have to do anyways. General maintenance, it can't be.
Like a roof or something.
You can't use it for that.
But
No, like that portable, I'm not sure, but like,
No,
you
portables,
can't,
yeah.
it's specific, like you can't use it for asbestos reclamation, because you have to do that. So things that you would do absent increased enrollment, you shouldn't be doing it, and that's the pickle, because we're in declining enrollment, so that's my.
But the two aren't connected.
Okay.
You don't have, even if we were to go ahead and look at raising the rate, which I think we're behind the max allowable by the state, you don't need rising enrollment to do that, because the amount of these developer fees is like, I have to get this right, is like 1% of building costs. So it's going to take more than whatever the community's putting in to deal with the the square footage for one student. So there isn't.
Right, but the
So
concept sticks that it's for, in general, growth projects.
Yeah.
So when
However, the law is a little loosey-goosey, and ultimately, the final decision's made by the auditor. And so, when you have a project that we wanna do, and we're not sure if we can spend these funds on it, we go to the auditor and we say, can we spend these funds or not? Are you gonna do a finding on us or not? Because that's the bottom line. It's the audit company that has to interpret the law and interpret the project and make the two go like this.
This
They're the
is
final say on it.
what we initially wanted to buy that property with, correct?
We can use it for expanding the school site, but that's an expansion project.
Okay, what about?
Just like adding a classroom would be expanding, or,
Is this now in the time to be talking about how to spend this, or is
Sure.
that for a later date? Or
Not tonight.
don't talk about it tonight?
Well, it's not on the agenda,
Well,
it's
we
just.
don't have any input.
I
My
can give
suggestion
input
would
on
be
how to spend
that
this.
doing, we have to do this, we have to do this report, rather than doing a visioning tonight.
Okay, that's what I don't know, so that's what I was asking.
But this
It is a
information.
good thing for us to do,
Okay,
to
put
do that
on the agenda
vision.
to brainstorm.
Right.
Okay.
Then we
Okay.
have this
Yeah,
information
or-
kicks the next thing.
Got it.
Another way that we can handle it is I can collect ideas
I was just
and
gonna say,
put together kind of a list of ideas, and then we can have a discussion about it.
I think
Right.
polling the school, the staff, and thinking of creating ways to use that money, you know, I'm not sure.
I would love to add a steam room down on the middle field,
Me
on
too.
in the far corner.
That's a great idea.
As I said, maybe talk to the staff and see what
Okay.
and if they come up with a steam room, well,
I'd like to
It
call
isn't
for the
that kind
vote.
of steam room.
I understand.
I'd like to call for the vote
Oh, with a
and move on.
jacuzzi and
Yeah.
a pool and.
Ms.
Good.
Hill,
That'll
will
work.
you- will
A
you
pool
call for the
across from
vote,
the pool.
please?
There's a full mutiny. Call
You
the
guys,
vote.
Ken is calling our
Okay.
vote.
Vote.
Member Brownell?
What are we voting on?
To
Approving
approve
this plan.
report.
Oh, the plan, oh,
The
yeah,
report.
we love the report, yes, aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
President Throop?
Aye.
Member Wilson?
Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
10.
9, 10, okay.
Well, it says it right on the agenda.
Well, mine are spread out more. And I know that you have reviewed these in more detail than I have. Would you care to give us an
I
overview?
left my notes in my office.
I would, you know what, most of, when I looked at them,
Yeah.
most of them are
They're
because
just-
of laws
some
and
law has
whatnot.
changed, right.
I would be happy to make a motion to approve them all right now without going over them individually.
I'd be happy to second it.
Right on.
I'd be happy to vote.
Okay, do we have a vote to accept all
Oh,
10
no, no, no. I'm just
proposed?
kidding.
I knew it.
I mean, if
There's
you
always-
have
what
a
about my
significant
Well, we can always have voters support it.
Just please bring it up. Okay, is there a motion to approve all 10 of the board?
I did make the motion, and Val seconded.
Yeah, we're
Look,
done.
if I don't call for motions, I can't be listening to you and other things. It's appropriate not to shout out a motion when you want to make it. We haven't gotten there yet.
We still seconded it.
Yeah, you can't tell us when we can and can't make a motion,
I
Terry.
absolutely can. You can only make a motion when you're recognized by the chair.
So you're sorry.
I'm not.
Okay. Carrie, would you like to make a motion?
Nope. No, thank
Okay,
you.
would someone like to make a motion that we accept all 10 board policy updates?
I will make that motion that we accept
Thank
all
you.
10.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Ms. Hill, would you?
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
President Throop?
Aye.
Member Wilson?
Aye.
Member Brownell?
Oh. Okay, next thing on the agenda is reconvene the open session. Or it should have been
No,
the
it's-
closed session, I
Yeah.
think, but we decided we didn't have to do that anyway. Review of action items and tasking. This has been a pretty
There's no
clean.
future agenda item.
I've got, question about minutes. I've got, I'll be bringing back that, special ed aid release. I've also,
The special ed what?
special ed aid, you don't need to put that in the notes, I got it. In the minutes, I mean.
We talked about that in closed session, so.
Yeah, that'll come back in open session. And the unrestricted reserve balance for previous 5 years. What I have
And
in my
beginning
notes.
to think about a facilities plan.
Yes.
A what?
Facilities.
plan.
Facilities plan.
Facilities bond?
Plan.
Plan.
No bond.
Okay.
Ron's gonna do a bond.
I need Ron and Susan and Val to do the doodle poll before those dates go away. That's what happened last time.
Sorry, we,
So it's okay. Hopefully she still has those 3 dates or else we're back to the drawing board.
I'll get you something tomorrow.
Okay.
I will too.
I actually didn't get to the information, so I don't understand.
Okay, so is there anything further?
Yeah, what about future agenda items?
Okay,
So I was on a walk the other day by the bus barn while Smart Walk was doing their installation, and I ended up talking with one of the guys, and he said there was indication of possibly the school putting a fence back up there. So putting a fence in that easement area has been talked about and finalized a couple times in my tenure on the board, so I would like an agenda item to bring back, in April of 2015, there was a proposal to table all bus barn related action items. I would like to bring that back to the table, as well as action item from that agenda, review approved proposal to take no further action regarding the bus barn easements, with those attachments from that April meeting, because that was not a good time for community relations in the board. And if this fence is coming up again, I want to know why it is. So I'd like to have a discussion on why it's coming up, and we tabled that in 2015, and I would like to bring that back.
I object to that. I think that the issues we were talking about then are completely different from the issues we're talking about now.
But I'm not aware of any of the issues that we're talking about now, because it
Well,
hasn't come to us.
I hadn't finished speaking until you interrupted me. I would suggest that we ask Superintendent Smith to bring us a report and his recommendation on items regarding, now you're just talking about the fence on the alley side of the bus barn, is that
Yes.
correct? Then I suggest we ask Superintendent Smith to bring us a report and recommendation on that. Is that satisfactory?
No, I don't understand why it's being brought up again when in 2009, 2010, and 2015, this has been done, and I have the signed paperwork at home. Why is it coming up again?
I think the.
But we can't discuss it right now because it's not on the agenda, so that's,
Talking procedurally, I think Terry's suggesting that.
We start afresh.
Scott is going to explain why he's why it was part of his.
but I've asked in a couple emails twice that, and I haven't really received an answer, so that's why I would like, as a board, to discuss it.
Well, and I just made a suggestion about a way we should approach that.
Well, I mean, but
So there's no surprises? I was looking at the fence on both sides. Not to complicate it.
But I just want to know why. I guess what's frustrating for me is to be on a walk out in the community, talk to a guy that's working on school, and find out from him that something that was very much a black eye for us is now out there. Why didn't it come to us? Why did I have to hear it from a smart walk worker? To me, that just it doesn't feel right. You know, and I know Chris Pope didn't ask for it. I talked to him today on my walk. You know, so it's uncomfortable finding out something like that from somebody else, and it hasn't even come to us yet. That he said we're building a fence, and I couldn't answer why when.
All I said to him was, sooner or later we're gonna build a fence here, but I wasn't gonna do anything until you guys did the solar panel project, because I thought you need to access the roof from this side of the building. But you turned out you're coming in from the other side of the building. That's all I said to him.
Yeah.
So, you know.
All right.
Okay, so if you will provide a report for us on, and recommendation on the fencing and the bus barn property, I think that's appropriate.
I have one more, potentially. I know that recording the minutes, will you shut that over a little bit?
I'll get that.
Videotaping our meetings is not cost effective, but I don't know if recording our meetings, I know Coast does that, they have a little equipment. I mean, I can use a computer and do it, but I don't know if, I would like to discuss maybe audio recording our meetings and seeing if that's a possibility without too much extra hardware and time and effort. Is anybody else interested in that?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think maybe it can help in looking back at what we talked about and seeing how we're responding to things. I don't think that's a problem to me.
Is anybody else willing to?
It's not of particular interest to me.
Either.
Yeah, me either. And can we get, do we ask now to get so we can brainstorm ideas and even like your idea of polling, just to get ideas on spending that money? Is that now or not?
Brainstorm ideas on
Future agenda item for
That we
develop.
weren't supposed to do then, is that trying to get it on the agenda, or is that just something that's naturally gonna happen on the agenda?
Right, that'll be coming. Do you want it on January's agenda?
I don't know, I mean,
There's gonna be a lot of people out of town, a lot of stuff happening between now and then. I doubt that I would have any list
by then,
by then.
okay.
Oh, right, because of
Wait on that.
vacation. Right.
But, maybe by February.
Okay, that sounds good.
So discussion about ideas on spending developer fees or capital outlay projects in general.
I think it was specifically developer fees, right?
Yeah, I don't know how we guys,
Yeah, but it would be a capital.
Were you talking about this?
fee.
Yes.
I mean,
That's the developer fees, right?
But in my sense, first you look at a project and then you make your choice about the best source of funding for that project.
that's what I'm trying to put on the table so we can all start talking about it, or he can start polling people
Okay.
or whatever.
Okay, and we haven't had an opportunity to do that until just now because we were potentially gonna try to use those funds for the purchase of the property.
Right.
We decided not to proceed with that,
If
so,
we back away, something may surface, and if we haven't done anything here,
It's
then,
gonna take a while to get anything.
that's why you gotta keep things
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, but starting things now is great because it could be completed by the beginning of
Yeah.
next school year.
No, I'm with you. I was absolutely appropriate next thing to do.
But personally, I like the idea of, of getting some ideas going before, not starting a discussion at a board meeting from zero, from just, not blue sky.
quite frankly, usually, many school boards, when they're gonna have that discussion, would do it in a workshop, they'd have an extra meeting, and I would recommend that, but I just see us having so much trouble getting people agreeing to come to an extra meeting that I'm discouraged about doing that.
Maybe we should see how far we get within a regular board meeting. If we don't
Okay,
get very far and there's
But,
not a lot of.
but we'll need to
agreement or
set up a
insight or
time limit
vision.
then, I think, because those discussions can go on and on, so when we set the agenda for that board meeting,
Set a
I'm
time
gonna
limit.
suggest that we set a maximum
This
length.
Crystal doesn't
Well,
have time.
also, what I was kind
Crystal
of hearing
doesn't have
is
time
some
outside
kind of
theirs.
input to Scott. Scott would probably have a lot of ideas too, and have a, here's a menu of things we can start discussing rather
Yeah.
than.
Well, and, I mean, honestly, our options are gonna be limited because it's not like we have a lot of extra space to do construction projects on. We have very limited space.
Alrighty,
Okay, thank you all.
we
We
adjourn?
are adjourned, 9